Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Shon Kingrey is the Vice President of Fixed Operations at Kayser Automotive Group in Madison, Wisconsin, a great friend of the Fixed Ops community. Shon, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you for having me. It's always an honor. It's always a privilege.
Well, today is special, Shon. It's a keynote, long overdue, long time in coming, and we are really eager to hear your perspective on the industry and all that is happening, not only around us, but also a lot of the happenings for Shon Kingrey recently as well.
Well, thank you. And Ted, I owe you a debt of gratitude, as I've shared, obviously, over the last couple months. I've made some big changes that, quite frankly, as I've made very clear, the group that I'm with found me because of you. They found me through the roundtables. They actually found me through the Star Wars episode where you and I did a one-on-one where I had a few creatures standing behind me that are still in Florida, by the way. And it was probably one of the most nervous interviews I've ever done, by the way, because it wasn't my comfort zone at the time. I'm telling you, I was uncomfortable. The color was wrong. It just didn't go well. But I got to tell you, Ted, is that, and again, I'm going to give shout outs to Tully on the hours and Ed Roberts on the pickup and delivery. But where I'm at in my Q4 of my career, as I've called it, is now that I've reached the 50 years old and I've raised my children and they're all grown up and I have 8 grandchildren and 5 children, and I'm in Q4, and where I'm changing and where my focus has changed, where a lot of people have reached out to me and says, how do you move from sunny Florida with a big house and a heated pool and everything you have down there, to cold winter Wisconsin? Now, this is my home. This is where I'm from. I've been to, we'll say, 100+ Green Bay Packer games now in my life, including Christmas Day in Miami and Lambeau Field a couple, 3 or 4 times since I've been here the last couple months. But that all being said, this is my home. And when I interviewed with everybody, Ted, as you know, as I traveled the country, I now know what the main focus is. And it was your show with Marco that tipped my hat to that. That, listen, it's all, at this point, it's about the employee. It's about the customer. It isn't about us anymore, okay? It isn't about the fact that a technician's not going to work 6 or 7 days a week like you and I did growing up in the business. It's not. It's unheard of nowadays. It's not the $35 an hour. It's not that. It's about the employee and about a quality of life. There's got to be a work-life balance. I may not have found that yet, but for the new millennials, as my children hate to be called, the new millennials, it is about work-life balance. There's a mental evenness that they require, or they just won't come work for you. And as you know, as I have a partnership with Joe Lockhart now, and as Joe hires people, it's the number one question. It's not money. It's what do you offer that nobody else offers? Because everybody's offering $35 an hour. Everybody's offering $40 an hour for flat rate technicians. But what do you give that nobody else gives? And again, as I always say, I'm probably not as loud and as direct as Mr. Williams is, but it is my passion. It is what I'm focused on. And it is ultimately why I ended up in Madison, Wisconsin. It's the group. I work for 3 brothers who each have their own individual role, who have on the walls pictures of their 40+ year employees that are extremely, and there's the list. It's huge to know that there's a group that gets it, that at 6 o'clock at night, they do close so that their employees can go home and have dinner with their family. And that's variable and fixed. Yeah. Wow. So it's unheard of. And so to answer your question and to go back and forth, Ted, what's new in my career? It's 100% employee focused now. It's what tools can we put in place, to make their job easier. And sure, it's all about gross. It is about gross. It's about net. It's about the bottom line. But what tools do we have? And I can use X time. I can use Sunbit. I can use, the training side, and we'll get into John Fairchilds and like I said, Traver's going to be my BDC, or is now officially my BDC. As we go through that, and Brook AI, I mean, I can keep going down the list. Ted, quite frankly, you bring them to the table. Those are
and Shon, I think, to your credit as well, we've helped vet a lot of the names that you mentioned. And maybe some don't need as much vetting as others do, but those are some of the big names. And, they've passed a lot of tests along the way. And you've been there for that as well.
Right. Well, and I appreciate that, Ted, but you're right. But those are all names that we talk about and have panels with, Fixed Ops Roundtables through Fixed Ops Roundtables, but they're the consistency that are there. They're the ones that agree to the partnership. This isn't they're not vendors, they're partners. Yeah. And I firmly believe that they're partners with us. They're partners with the group. They partner with my teams. And again, I can continue with that as John Fairchild's going to come into Q2 for us and do on training. And you have to give the tools to the employees so they can succeed.
And, together, I think you and I and the audience, we've all been exposed to those, and we've seen a lot of best practices, and we've seen a lot of pain points that those solve as well. Talk to me a little bit more about quality of life, because I remember you and I on a panel early on, I don't remember exactly how long ago it was, when Marco talked about it's not all about the compensation. It's about, the respect. It's about, a human being, and the fact that he's recognized and in a place that, he wants to call home.
It is. And, it's funny. I actually had the conversation, I can say today, with somebody making the comment where Marco said, don't buy his pizza. Listen,
yes,
we can call Little Caesars and get pizza. We don't buy his pizza. It's not about the pizza. It's about the recognition. And we have literally, in this organization, taking that, it's barbecue lunches, by the way. It's barbecue lunches that we serve the employees. What does it cost you? It costs you nothing. It is about the recognition. It is about walking through the shop and every day. And I got in trouble from you once, so I'll be polite I'll be politically correct when I say this. It's knowing about the technician what makes them tick. It's knowing what their wife's name is. It's knowing what their kids are. Is it fishing? Is it hunting? Is it flying an airplane? You have to know what makes them tick. And you're right. Marco brought that to light. Marco had a tragedy in his life, and it changed who he was. And in that tragedy, it changed his outlook. And to be very honest with you, Ted, those roundtables very early on, which started a series, I don't know, we're in number 7 or 8 now, of that one roundtable of the group that we talk about the same thing every single time. It keeps, and of all my feedback, it's probably one of the larger feedbacks I have of talking about technicians, what recruiting is. Again, we can all hire Joe Lockard and hire for $35 an hour. It's not about what you're paying. It's about what you're giving on the side.
And it's amazing. We've had that panel with Joe Lockard and Automax, the tech vendors, I think we've called them,
yes.
Technicians panel. But every time we talk and get together, that conversation evolves and it goes further and further. And there are things happening today that are new and that weren't happening last fall or last summer or last spring, because the industry is evolving and changing. And, we're bringing all that to light. So, there's a lot to be said for that, Shon Kingrey.
There is, Ted. And it's funny. I had a meeting with a group this morning at the same store, and we're talking about Saturday service and where Saturday service falls because COVID changed the business. COVID changed. Forget the fact I was in Florida and we didn't have COVID in Florida. Okay. Wisconsin had COVID and yes. Opening up on Saturday services again. And the technicians come to me as a group and say, listen, if we agree to come in a half hour early and we agree to stay a half hour late, the entire group of technicians, Monday through Friday, will you let us still have our Saturdays off? Mm-hmm. And Ted, I believe, because I'm old school, that if sales is open, service should be open. I think we're one big family, no walls. And my saying is always better together. Okay. But looking at a shop of 10 technicians, if I can get 10 more hours a day times 5 days a week is 50 hours a week. That back to Tully, I get 50 hours a week that I didn't have versus 4 hours or 5 hours on a Saturday with one technician who's programming keys and doing recalls. If you do the math, it makes sense. I signed off on that deal on a New York 2nd. We'll still do oil changes. I still have an express lane open on Saturdays, but the main shop's willing to give me an extra half hour in writing, by the way, because you got to hold them accountable. And there's processes in place to do this. But they'll give me an extra half hour in the morning and an extra half hour every night in order to have a quality of life during the weekends.
When you got there, what were the first things that you looked at that you said you needed to put in place? I remember you talking about process early on.
Yeah, it was. And that's where some of the and I'm not going to say vendors, some of the partners come into play, where you got to have a scheduling system, because very honest, they didn't have a scheduling system. And I hate to say the tail was wagging the dog because it sounds negative, but we were almost to the point there was no dog, period. It was just the tail, where I have people wandering in at 7:30, 8, 8:15, 8:30, and then you walk through the shop at 2:30 or 3 o'clock and everybody's gone home. At the end of the day, guys, we're here for the client. We're not here for us. We're here for the client. We have to schedule what's convenient for them. So bringing an X-Time on board, bringing Traver on board to answer the BDC, now lets the advisors do what they need to do. So to answer your question, first things first, you got to have a good foundation, a good process for scheduling, a schedule that's convenient for the clients. Okay. I'm not asking technicians to work 13, 14-hour schedules. We'll get to that because that's a new theory too we can talk about. But I'm not asking them to work anything more than anybody else is working. But you got to have a good process in place for a good appointment system that allows the client to schedule what's convenient for them. Then you get to pick up and delivery, but it all fits into the big picture. And then you have to have a system that works for them, a good walk-around tool, a good scheduling tool. But back to Traver and the BDC. Listen, the advisor's job is to sell. It's not to answer phones. Yeah. Listen, Traver is my air traffic control. You put it on the runway and I'll park that airplane. That's the advisor's job, is to park that airplane. And that's the process that had to be put in place. And to be very honest, I officially came here November 1st. And we launched in December. We did a quick launch, and I give credit to everybody that was involved. It was a hard press. It was a big request to say you have 30 days to launch. And every one of the partners all took that. And that includes Sunbit, that includes X-Time, that includes Traver, that includes everybody. You have 30 days. And together we launched it. I got Brook AI kicking in the background. I mean, everything is flowing. And all of a sudden it's amazing. The resistance you got. Okay, you have a 45-year employee that's always answered his phone for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm always going to answer that phone. Well, you got to break that a little bit. Sometimes you got to break the toy to go forward.
Shon, I know there's got to be resistance. All right. Anytime you come in with anything new person coming in, new ideas, it's not the way we've done it before. I believe you told me what, 7 locations, 7 rooftops there?
Yes, sir. About to be 8. That is correct.
How many technicians and how many advisors or ASMs?
Total technicians, a little over another 120. Total advisors, just north of 40.
So, to our audience that's watching, the other fixed ops directors who are in place, or maybe having made a move recently or making a move, how do you deal with that resistance, going in? Because I imagine, going into a colder climate, especially, there might be some of that.
So it got really cold. And so let's back into that story, and I'll make that quick. So again, I work for 3 brothers who have a very defined roles, and they're very open door policy. I think that's an overused cliche, but for them, it genuinely is a very open door policy. They asked me to say, we want you to evaluate in 60 days, give us your opinion. Well, I fast forwarded that to 30 days because it was very obvious, very quick, of the things that had to be done. I can't teach someone how to sell. I can't hire a John Fairchild if I have 20 waiters at 10 a.m. in the morning, because the advisors are scheduling what's convenient for them. So you have to have buy-in from the top. As our friend Tully Williams says, the general manager has to be involved. The owners have to be involved. If you don't have buy-in from the top, it's never going to work. So it involved having a meeting with the owners, and then having a meeting with the GMs. And the advantage I think I have versus everybody that's been here 40 plus years is I'm not emotionally attached yet. I see the business side of it. I'm trying to build a legacy for the group that I'm with, for their children. And in order to do that, you got to have a process. To answer your question, Ted, yes. When I met with the owners on the initial 30 days, they said, we love how everybody loves you. I said, well, that's going to end pretty quick, just so you know. The hugs and kisses are going to stop, because when I launch this and I create change is uncomfortable for everybody. Yeah. I'm going to get resistance, and resistance we got. Was there pushback? Yes. Was there some, I don't want to call knockout dragouts, but were there some interesting conversations? Yes. But at the end of the day, and Ted, I go back to you, people understand that when you talk and you bleed fixed operations, you got to know what you're talking about to get to where you're at. All right. And this isn't act as if. This is do the processes that work, not reinventing the wheel. And I understand what works in Destin, Florida may not work in Madison, Wisconsin.
That won't work here, Shon.
That won't work here. We've never done it that way. Okay. But guess what? We're going to try it. And guess what? If I'm wrong in 6 months, you let me know. But it's funny how after 30 days, everybody's like, hey, this is kind of cool. We're getting more work through the shop. Hey, this is kind of cool. My phone's not ringing off the hook. And I got Brooke answering phone calls behind the scenes, monitoring my phone calls for status phone calls, by the way. Because now that I've taken advisors' phone calls for scheduling appointments off, now I'm monitoring status phone calls. It's amazing how the same advisors are still getting the same status phone calls. And now I can monitor and control that.
Good for you. Well, you're still early in the game. You said November 1st. So here we are coming up on February 1.
Yes.
And, you've got big shoes to fill there, but you've done this before and you are a pro, and your star is rising, Shon Kingrey, throughout the industry. I see it now in a lot of things that are happening. So congratulations to you on making the move and on making all this happen and making it real world.
Well, thank you very much. And Ted, I'll say this, as we were doing the launch, as I sat with my owners and I says, when you did the 2023 plan, what was your goal? He goes, 10%. I said, not on my watch. I've promised them 18%. And I'm going to be very honest. I think
18.
I promised them 18. And I know you want to know in my past, I was doing 30% plus year over year growth. I'm going to be conservative and say 18%. I'm hoping we're north of 25 by Q4 year over year.
That's very bold, Shon.
It's process, Ted.
Well,
it's process.
Well, so here we are, first month of the year, just about done. You got a lot of peers who look up to you in the industry. As I said, that star is rising. So if you had to look into your crystal ball and give us any advice to the managers and dealers and leaders watching today for what we need to do for the rest of 2023, what would Shon Kingrey suggest? What would you recommend to the people watching today? What do you see ahead?
I go back to how we started the conversation, Ted. You have to focus on your employees. Okay. It is more now than ever. I go back 28 years when I got in the business where we threw it against, you hired 3 and hoped that 2 stuck.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do. I used to call it the sticky octopus that walked down the wall and you hope it stuck because some did and some didn't. You don't have that luxury anymore. You don't have the 3 octopuses to throw against the wall. My number one thing would be focus on your employees. Focus on who you have. It is cheaper to train the ones you have than to go out and hire new ones. I love Joe Lockhart and Automax. He's not a cheap date, okay? He's expensive. He does, and he does a great job at what he does, but you have to understand, you hired that person. That person did not come to this store for 10 hours a day to fail. They came to succeed. So either you made a poor hiring decision or you did a poor job training. Train the one you have. Find out what makes them tick and work with the ones you have.
Great advice, my friend. Well, thank you for all you do for Fixed Ops. Congratulations on the move to VP of Fixed Ops at the Kayser Automotive Group.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. And Ted, as we always tell you every time, thank you for all you do for the business. You bring Fixed Ops to the Roundtable. You bring everybody to the forefront, and you have certainly made a name for a lot of people. So we owe you a ton of gratitude.
Shon, you make my job easy. So
thank you.
Everybody, Shon Kingrey, the Vice President of Fixed Operations, Kayser Automotive Group, here today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.